Welcome to CyberCast. I'm Rostra Fortune. As adversaries evolve, DISA officials are accelerating efforts to modernize cyber capabilities, streamline acquisition, and prepare for a future where AI plays a central role in defending department networks. Brian Hermann is the director of DISA's Portfolio Acquisition Executive for Cyber Capabilities. He spoke to me at AFCEA TechNet Cyber 2026 in June about DISA's acquisition journey, implementing AI into its systems, and how Thunderdome is evolving throughout the department.
We've been trying to achieve the ability to move faster and have more flexibility in meeting needs. And so there's been a bunch of things that we've tried to do to make that better in general. And the first is we're trying to combine the budgets in a way that give the portfolio leaders trade space to be able to make decisions, because when we have all of the money siloed to individual systems, we don't get to make any changes to those. We've been changing the budget space just a little bit to make sure that can work for us. And then we've been looking at, how our contracts can be made to be more flexible and allow us to deliver things. So we just spoke a little bit downstairs about the need to have things be agile in their delivery format. So it doesn't help to have the expectation of a waterfall or even, frankly, 2 DevSecOps pipelines. If a developer is doing things in an agile manner, let's do them in our DevSecOps pipeline where we can collect information about the system and try to make good risk management decisions to make it possible to get things in the hands of warfighters sooner. So that's, I think, generally going fairly well. Everybody understands the need to do that. One of the challenges that we've perennially had is the ability to make a change from something that we've historically done to something that we need to do differently in the future. In part, that's because we haven't had sufficient funding to make that transition happen, where we have to perhaps pay for 2 capabilities for a short transition period. So when we talk to vendors, we're interested in how their proposal allows us to shorten the transition period, reduce the cost associated with making a change. And I think probably that's the best set of agile things that we're trying to do. Of course, especially in the cyber area, I follow what we used to always call the ABCs, which is to adopt something that exists or to buy something that exists before you choose to custom develop something that is a one-off solution. So you can look for us to have less government developed solutions and have more customization / integration of commercial solutions in our space. And recently, we've also begun to make a transition to allow us to adopt software as a service as an option. And I have an example. We have a capability called full content inspection, and it replaces a legacy program that NSA originally developed called SharkSeer. And we had a whole PMO and we had a vendor responsible for evolving and continuing to patch and develop that capability. And now we pay a vendor to provide that as a service. And the answer is better than what we had when we had the government develop. This is definitely better analysts, better operators in the space than what we had when we were using the old solution.
On that better note, I know the efficient, Ms. Davies talked last week a lot about the new big 365 contract and the efficiency side of things. I know downstairs you talked about integrating multiple solutions. How do you sort of square those things with efficiency? How do you make those multiple solutions efficient, essentially?
So there's interesting space where efficiency is the byword that you would need to follow. I would argue that maybe 365 is a good place for that word, because the department is using it for 98, 99% of our office solutions and collaboration capabilities. So why shouldn't we do that together? I applaud it. To be frank, it's what we wanted to do originally when we came to 365. So I'm all for it in that space. In other cases, we have to have, I think Chris Pachkowski talked about it in the context of transport. We have to have variety and diversity. And variety sometimes is in the form of having different solutions by different vendors to make sure that we're not locked into something and that we don't have, a myopic view of feeling confident that we're, in my case, cyber secure, but we haven't looked out broadly across the terrain to say what other options are available to us, what should we be doing. So this TechNet Cyber, I came with a broken foot because it's important for me to hear from all the tech vendors where technology is going. I know a little bit about where the threat is going, and I'm looking at that. You could argue, and historically, there are cases where we've made too many decisions based on just on economics, the good day of problems. So if everything's connected, everything's working, we run this as an enterprise. There are lots of other capabilities that we have that have to be ready for the bad day. And we've had a little bit of experience with some bad days recently with operations in the Middle East and so on. So we start to get a feeling for what that threat is and what we could face in the future. So
I have a lot of questions about that good day, bad day stuff, but I'll sort of put a pin in that just to ask about, I know you talked about AI a little bit. You can't have these sort of conferences without AI. You talked about needing confidence that AI is going to be able to sift through the data, make the right decisions. So how is it integrating? How do you see it integrating within that framework for protecting the network?
So the first place that we're seeing it is integrating with our security orchestration and response functions. So that the typical security operations center DCO analyst being able to automate the functions that they provide. So SOAR was an automation function generally, but now you add AI onto that. So it's not as if the operators themselves have to develop the formulas to say, here's what I do in this case. The tools can help at least propose the formulas and say, based on what you've done in the past, based on what we know about the threat, here's what we think should be done. Yes, no, and then help us move forward. So that's the first place that I'm seeing it. And that's the place that's relevant to the desire to take a load off of the defensive cyber operators' shoulders and allow them to use their brain on the higher end fight, which is the next thing. So I don't expect all of that to happen. I think we'll get some great insights for them to support that thought, but that's the first place we're doing AI. And the second place is likely to be at the perimeter. So as we see attackers leveraging AI to change their attack, they use a specific profile to attack. And historically, so if you think about it, we used to see a bad actor coming at us from an IP, and we would block the IP. Now we know, vendors or attackers can change their IP in 2 minutes, and they're coming at it. So blocking IPs can't be the solution. So then there's a whole broad set of things. So what do? We look for their typical threat vector, and then we try to block that no matter where it comes from. I think those are the first places that I want to focus our AI attention, because despite the fact that I've had people that ask me to defend my cybersecurity budget that said, well, why would you need a perimeter if you have zero trust? And perhaps technically, however, there are things like denial of service and things like that the perimeter does provide very effective protections for us. So there's an element to maybe even renewed thought about the perimeter in this space. And I don't think the department's all the way to zero trust yet. So maybe at some point in the future, we get a little bit lighter. But the director has asked us to take on the challenge of modernizing that perimeter to become cheaper and more effective, but also take into consideration the kinds of attacks that we're seeing, and AI-based attacks are the first set of those. My feeling is getting comfortable with a rule associated with orchestration of security responses is, the first step is you have a rule be proposed, and then a human, that is very capable validates that. The next step is starting to feel comfortable with the proposal of that rule being effective right out of the gate. And will it be perfect? Probably not. But I think that's something we have to learn. We have to figure out how to get there. The risk, of course, is if the AI gets poisoned somehow, and then you have a problem with how you respond. So you can't get out of the fact that I expect to have better, more capable operators. And if you talk to General Stanton and you hear him talk about zero trust and AI together, you will see that he has a clear vision for changing the thought process of our defensive cyber operators and our CSSP technicians. and they need to be able to be much more active in the defense of individual applications even than they have historically been. So he's got our DISA J7 team developing an entirely new training plan that says, now that we have things like zero trust and now that we have AI, how do we work differently? And I think that's, it's, if you want to go all the way back to the efficiency question, the easy answer would be, oh, well, we can have less defensive cyber operators, but that's not the reality. Is we're going to need at least all the people that we have right now focusing on the higher end fight and letting some of the automated tools work on the things that we feel much more confident in.
Yeah, I guess kind of to pick on that on the kind of budget level. I know you mentioned having to defend your budget, but like people cost money, and there's always this need for people to human in the loop stuff, all that kind of stuff. How do you sort of see that in the next few years, especially as the zero trust deadlines start coming up?
So in my mind, I think the lowest bar for success in that space is to not have to grow the defensive cyber operator workforce. If we can allow automation to make them more effective at their jobs. So you have, you have journeymen doing some of those functions, and then you have the highest level operators in that space. We'd probably like to have the high level operators thinking about that high end fight and less of the lower skilled, lesser skilled team on that force. But I honestly, 3 years ago, I had told you that I want fewer people in that space, but I don't think that's realistic. Trying to hold the line maybe with automation is probably the best we could imagine. And we may grow it because of that, the expectations of being more active in the fight. But let's find a way to help do their job.
I want to come back to the status and the deadlines and those kinds of things, because Thunderdome is rolling out. Can you kind of give us an update on where that is across the department?
So we have, I believe the number is, we have implemented Thunderdome at over 500 sites across the department in support of the Fourth Estate network optimization, DAFAs. We have also done it for a number of other kind of independent customers. So one of our biggest challenges is who do you serve with what set of tools that you have? And so we have a very obvious close connection with DoDNet, but we've done Thunderdome also in support of Southcom. They came to us and said, we need some help getting to zero trust. So we implemented Thunderdome for them as well, and that's been successful. So I think zero trust and 91 or 152 activities there's some serious thought behind that, but there's some element of that that's partially arbitrary, and it's hard to consume. So my concern about ICANN or about zero trust is, how do we not just have the solution, but adopt the solution for the places in the cyber terrain where it's relevant? And the most obvious challenge for that space is ICANN. So we have thousands of applications across the department, and they have not moved as quickly as we would like them to adopt approved ICAM solutions. So there are a handful of those that have been approved at the department level on the unclassified side. Right now, we are the only one that's approved on the classified side. So ICAM is a program itself, but it's also a component of Thunderdome. It is part of our cocktail of solutions for zero trust. Part of the evolution of zero trust is the mix of the cocktail is going to change over time as well. We'll find things that work well, things that maybe don't work as well as we'd like, and we make changes. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to do a new OTA for ICAM to improve the way ICAM works. The decision that we made at the tail end of COVID, as we stood up enterprise ICAM, was to adopt a capability as the authentication point that we had used for CVR, which was the Microsoft Teams solution that was put in place for the department. That was an expedient choice, and it was the right one at the time. It's probably not the right one now. So I'm looking to industry to help me understand, do I find another COTS-based solution for that, or do I go completely to the other end and say, is there a SaaS that solves ICAM for us in the future? So I think you'll see, certainly by the end of this calendar year, a new OTA that allows us to do that. That's a tremendously challenging effort that we're going to undertake, because any change to identity is the basis for any trust that we do have. And if we have to keep the capability running to be able to make that transition, that's going to be significantly challenging, I think. And we're doing that while other application owners are onboarding to Thunderdome, Zero Trust, and ICAM, and we can't disenfranchise or cut off access to somebody that's already taken the effort to adopt ICAM as an example. So that's an example of us looking at the cocktail and saying, I think we need to adjust. It may not be a wholesale adjustment, but we need to understand how could it be better than what we have today. And part of the lens of that is also looking at, my team always wants to say enterprise ICAM, and we are enterprise ICAM, but we're more now, because we're delivering ICAM in support of the mission partner environment as well. And so that is a different problem than an enterprise solution where a cloud-based option is appropriate. We have to have something that's regionally disconnectable. And then we have to think about how we federate and work with our allies and coalition partners too. And that's the hard part. That's where what Nick was talking about with ACP 240 and all of that work. So we have to think about, do we federate with NATO, and NATO federates with all the individuals that are part of NATO, and do we federate with the Five Eye partners, and do we independently work with, or how do we work with those other partners that we think we might get involved with in Indo-PACOM, for example? Yeah.
Sort of in that vein, the acquisition process, how are you making sure that everything's safe and on the up, because you have all these additional requirements from coalition partners and, again, these sort of pieces that you have to deal with?
So there are standards for how we federate with any other ICAM solution, and then you layer on top of that some of the allied policy and things that we have in place to work with them. So part of it is what technically works, and then part of it is, so how should we do that? And then the last and perhaps most challenging part of it is we have to work with partners where they are. We can help make sure that we all agree on where we should go, but we can't let that prevent us from working together today and tomorrow. We can't wait for some mythical time in the future where everything will be nirvana. We know that's not the case. And it's hard enough with the partners that we work with every day. It's really hard when you think about sort of the episodic need to work with a country that you may not have historically. And that's why so much of the brittle network-centric coalition work is no longer relevant. I think probably the best example of that is what we're doing with the mission partner environment itself. So we've deployed capabilities for recent exercises in Indo-PACOM, and so it's a secret relative to our Five Eyes and some other partners kind of environment. But it is not a single offering that PAE Cyber offers, for example. It is a portfolio of functions. So it starts at the base with the hosting environment from our J9 folks. They bring a cloud-based but yet deployable solution to the environment. And on top of that, we layer some security functions like ICAM and like Thunderdome as the gateway function in that space. And then what I call killer applications in that space start with command and control. And so Caroline Bean's team brings the data about the common operational picture to the combatant commands, to our allied partners. And what they've been able to demonstrate is that if you log in as a U.S. member in Indo-PACOM, you get access to the things that you're authorized for because of Thunderdome's ability to use your identity and to make that access control decision. And if you logged in as a mission partner, say Australia, Japan, whatnot, you get access to the information that you're authorized access for. So we're leveraging Zero Trust in a way that's never been used in that space before. It is complex, and it probably requires eventually some change in policy on how gateways work, because we have to be able to operate in that space. And that's what it really brings. So we couldn't have a better leader in this space than General Stanton, because he was at the outset of Zero Trust, He's got experience with NSA and others, and we're trying to knock down the barriers that would cause it to be more challenging to work with than it already is. So I think that's phenomenal what they've done at the edge in that space. Yeah, I guess there's some of that I probably don't want to talk too deeply about, to be honest with you, but everybody understands the need to do this differently. And I think that we have the right people in the right leadership positions to be able to make that happen. Our allies are bought in too, and they couldn't be happier, to include some of them adopting exactly the same technologies that we brought with Thunderdome as well. So they're using the same tools on their side from a zero trust perspective to provide us protections from them protections from us, whatnot. And then that gateway sits there in the space as well. So you'll see also very soon a second production OTA being awarded for Thunderdome that will serve the foreign military sales requirement for the department and our allies as well. They've been clamoring for it. We've done it in some creative ways up to this point, but there will be a new one awarded very soon. I'd like to see in the next 2 months. So I think SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, is the best example of where that's a problem. There are plenty of solutions out there. They don't talk to each other by definition. The vendors have no interest in them talking to each other because it's all about market share for them. That's where I have to have vendors understand you're going to be part of a multiple solution space with the department. We're too big to be one single answer. And even if you think about it, the whole department is not on Thunderdome. Every service has their own thing that they're pursuing as well. Some similarity in some of the solutions, but not entirely. And there's goodness and badness associated with that. We would like to have the ability to have diversity versus forcing a solution on everybody. But sometimes it's right to force the solution. 365 is a good example. The place where it would be right to do that is where we're not getting support from industry to be interoperable. So we drive the things that we need from them, contentious conversations with vendors about how we need them to help us in that space. Vendor lock in a lot of different areas, and it's a problem for us because we don't get power when we get stuck. That brings the thought leadership to the function that we're talking about. Small, medium, large, doesn't matter to me. We do have to do our due diligence associated with CMMC and SBOM, kind of responsible sourcing of the functions that we're buying to make sure that it's secure as well. So that's something that sometimes that better maybe from a large company that you've worked with for years, maybe not so much with some new entrant into that space. But I'll tell you, there are places where the new entrants are the ones bringing the value and driving the innovation, and we're happy to work with them. Part of that has historically been a partnership that we have within the acquisition community, along with our chief technology office and emerging technology functions. So they help bring us solutions. So I like to say I give them problems and I ask for their help to find solutions, because typically my function is not pure science and technology where we're developing something that's totally new. We're looking to bring in technologies to do new things. And so I help them with problems, and they hopefully bring back to me solutions that we can use, and we have a path forward to making them part of our cocktail of cybersecurity solutions. I will tell you two things about that. So Federation Hub is going smoothly on the unclassified side. We're federating with all the partners that maybe give you a firm answer, but John Basie can help give you a better answer on whether we've made the connection to MyAuth, which I think is especially important between us and DMDC, because it brings the ability for us to work with all the different use cases that are so problematic across the department. The reason why people have trouble with ICAM is because the people that need to use their systems aren't all people that have common access cards issued by the department. Maybe there are other federal partners. Maybe they're industry partners, like DLA has to work with industry all around the world. Transcom has to work with shipping companies that'll never get a common access card. So how do we trust them? So that's the key federation in my mind, especially on the unclassified. On the secret level, we originally were going to do the Federation Hub there a little bit faster. The good news is we haven't had to. because the department has helped us out by not allowing others to have their own separate enterprise level ICAM solution on the secret level. And that's wonderfully helpful. So we can focus at the secret level right now on how we federate with allied and mission partners. One interesting thing that we did accomplish this year that was not on their original roadmap was to be able to federate on the unclassified level with Canada. So our Canadian partners can get into things that they need to. So if you look at NORAD Northcom, especially challenging use cases there, and that's been something that we had to work through our gateways team and our ICAM teams to make sure that could work, and that's been a success. So the one thing that I think is on our mind especially is the drive to accelerate PQC adoption. Step one of that is the basis even for identity is PKI. So we're doing some pretty aggressive work to try to roll back the timelines associated with when capabilities could be available. But then the follow-on steps from that is every piece of hardware, every software application that we buy, we need to make sure that it's compliant with those standards for PQC. And I think that's a big ask, a big challenge. So not unlike zero trust adoption across the department, there's probably a bunch of people that haven't heard that they have a role to play in PQC. So we will put the basic functions into PKI, and then we'll begin to test across the department. But it's a pretty challenging space, and we're trying to get our hands on what that space looks like. So when we talk about the challenge of adopting ICAM, I always say the important thing is what's the denominator? How many applications do we have? How many have adopted, et cetera? In this case, we kind of don't know the denominator for PQC yet. And so we've been working with the GovCIO team to understand with the tools that we already have and the data that we already have, how big is that problem? How challenging is that problem? And I think that's going to continue to be more and more interesting for the next 2 years or so. So we're helping to look at how some of the tools that we have, one of them that's notable is CMRS, which is the scorecard. So people think about it as the FITARA and that, scorecard, but the other piece of it is it's a wealth of information about things across the department. So DC cares a lot about it. What we've been doing is trying to mine that data a little bit to see what it can tell us about our PQC vulnerabilities and where actions need to be taken so that we can prioritize those actions and the actions to make that work. So, and there are cases where we're going to find, I think, that there are tools that we use, maybe an endpoint security sensor, that if we add a module to that, we can get much more clarity in terms of the PQC vulnerabilities or challenges in that space. So I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to probably even leverage some AI in that space. There are some vendors that have come to us and said that they have tools that can look at that and help us draw the conclusions that we need to as we go forward as well. And I think Dr. Hale's been leading that effort as well. But my data and analytics team is doing that as well. There's some limits on what we would talk about specifically in that space, but I think we have some thought on when we would expect to need to have PQC compliance in place. You see us trying to move a little faster than we had thought of a few years ago, and that's pretty challenging. So one thing I do want to say that I've been extremely proud of our team is in the data and analytics space. We are consolidating all of the agency's cybersecurity and operations data into one environment. And this is to answer the director's, one of his very first week questions that he asked was, where can I go and see all the data, whether it's ops data or security data, and make decisions based on that? And then he looks at our J3 folks and says, what are the questions you need answered? What's the data you need? Where is it? And what we found is that it was siloed in different places around the agency. So J6 had some, J9 had some in their hosting environment. Transport had their stuff, and we had security stuff at the enterprise. J6's stuff was maybe endpoint things. And now we're bringing that all together, and we're consolidating and making that data available where appropriate to other elements of the department as well. So everybody depends upon the perimeter that we provide. So they should have information about how the perimeter is working, what risk we see at that space as well. So the progress that team has made is phenomenal. And it's also indicative of the challenge that we're trying to overcome in terms of thought leadership. We have to have people that are data scientists and thinking about how not just the tools work, but understand the challenge of being an operator in the NOC or the SOC. And the progress that this team has made has been amazing. I expect certainly by the end of the year to have that complete so I can tell the director that we have all the stuff in one place, or at least it's federated in a way that allows an operator in one environment to access the data wherever it sits. So it's not just it's not a cost thing at all, really, because the amount of data, but the ability to have all that data together. And then obviously you go to the AI piece where you draw inferences based on having all that data together. So I can't say enough good things about that progress. And it's under the hood. You don't hear about it as Thunderdome. You don't hear about it as something else, but it does come from that. So we took the data platform that came from Thunderdome and made it the standard way of doing things. And then we're bringing all the data into that environment.
Well, terrific. So thank you so much for all this time.